how's everybody doing today?
Sorry.
That's okay. How's everybody doing? So we have Anne Marie, we have John Spurlock, Christy is here. I got some black boxes. I got Bill Young's beautiful picture of the deer. That looks like it might be at the top of Gray's Peak or something like that. Eric is here, Jacqueline. Okay, and we're recording. Rich has just jumped in, and we're recording for some people that are not going to be here today. So, welcome everybody to today's agent development class. Today we're going to be talking about comparable market analysis. It is sort of the second in the series of what we had done, previously. So the purpose today is to sort of help you master the art of using a comparable market analysis in your pricing of property and your presentations to sellers in order to be effective in a way that communicates your value to them as a real estate broker, and to be able to present it in a way that you can build trust with them and with understanding. It's not just to deliver numbers. I think so. I'm going to ask everybody a question as we get started, and I'm going to ask you guys to answer up. And I know some of you will, and some of you guys will probably be reluctant to do that. But how many of you would like to have me show you how to prepare a comparable market analysis where you'll never have another price objection again from a seller? It will be so easy to read the CMA that they will just automatically see the correct price. How many would like for that to happen?
My hand's up.
What's that?
My hand is up.
Your hand is up. Okay. Well, that's not going to be the results of this class today. And so I'm going to, manage that expectation right now. And the simple reason is that every single seller wants more than their house is worth. I don't know. There's some kind of a magical thinking kind of deal that goes on. One of my friends that, still in business in Big Bear that I trained some years ago, he said, talking about real estate with clients is like explaining the obvious to the unreasonable. I mean, the truth can be right here, right in front of somebody, and you show it to them, and they will say, no, it's over here somewhere. That is just part of human nature. And so as we go through our presentation today, or how to present a market evaluation in a way that will communicate value and strategy to a seller, we're still going to have objections and we're still going to have issues that we're going to need to deal with them. Okay. So I want to briefly recap what we talked about in the class last time. We talked about those factors that influence value. We talked about, rating views on a scale of 1 to 10. We talked about the quality of construction. We talked about the quality of materials. We talked about the ease of access to make access to a property. How many stairs are there? I mean, all of those different things, because they are different in houses and they don't show up in a comparable market analysis or in the numbers that people see price per square foot, we need to be aware of those factors and how they affect value. And we need to know our inventory well enough that when we're looking at a CMA or doing a presentation for a seller in a CMA, is that we're able to talk intelligently about those factors that they may not be taking a look at. That makes sense. Or that the CMA doesn't show them. Make sense? Okay. We talked about quality, fit, and finish. We talked about lot usability and that kind of thing. Today we're going to focus on how to communicate pricing and strategy in a way that will be effective using the CMA. So you're going to need to remember those factors that drive value and drive buyer appeal in the way that you present your information. Everybody with me so far on that? Okay. Okay. So, who can tell me what the definition of fair market value is? Eric probably because he just took his test. And Bill Young's an engineer at heart, so he can probably tell me.
It's too early for a question.
Too early for questions.
Um,
I
no,
love it.
I don't know what someone's willing to pay for it. Is that the
Exactly. It is. So here's the definition of fair market value. The definition of fair market value is what a knowledgeable, willing, and educated buyer is willing to pay for a piece of property, and what a knowledgeable, willing, and educated seller is willing to sell a property for. That's the definition of fair market value. When you have a buyer and you have a seller, and they're both educated and they're both properly motivated and they have good information, it's what they're willing to pay and what they're willing to sell for. That is the definition of fair market value in any market. As opposed to, it doesn't matter how much credit card debt the seller has. It doesn't matter how much they paid for it. Doesn't matter how many improvements they put into the property. It doesn't matter what their neighbor's house sold next door for. It is what a willing, educated buyer is willing to pay for it and what a willing and educated seller is willing to sell for it. And so that creates a lot of different problems for us. Sometimes we have unmotivated sellers. And so when they're confronted with, the truth of the market conditions, they may not be willing to sell for fair market value. I'm sure anybody that's worked with a seller has had that experience, right? And we also have buyers that will make, decisions based on their personal needs rather than the reality of the market. The other thing that happens quite often is that we have buyers and sellers that are not properly educated about the conditions of the market. And so they may be willing to buy or sell for a property that is above or below fair market value because they lack the correct education. Does that make sense for everybody? So does it sound like it's a nightmare to price property? Remember I said, pricing property in Big Bear is an art, not a science? Okay. I believe that's been true. I've been saying it for 40 years and I still believe that it's true. Okay. Fair market value, we talked about that. What it's not, we talked about that. A key principle is that price is a moving target because our market conditions are changing all the time. It may not be moving fast, but fair market value is changing all of the time. Sometimes it changes based on the customer's perceptions of value based on what they're hearing in the news. Does that make sense? Some of their expectations and things. Okay. So the reason that I shared all of that with all of you is that I wanted you to change your perspective from, I want to be able to come up with a number that is the value for the house. I want you to get away from the idea that this is what a house is worth. Okay. I mean, it's worth 475,000. I did the math. I did all of this stuff. It's exactly 475,000. I'm not that good, and I don't think anybody is really that good. And because the market's changing all the time, we're going to be talking about ranges more than we're going to be talking about a specific number. Is there anybody that disagrees with that? Okay. Okay. So the next thing, and I think you guys all have your notes, and there's going to be some places for you guys to write down if you want to. I'm on page 2 of the notes that I had shared. And what I put out is that the CMA is a sales tool, it's not a spreadsheet. Okay. Each of our clients has access to data. They have data by going to Zillow. They have data by going to realtor.com. They can get, information and different things there. They can read the newspaper and get data about pricing and price per square foot and conditions of the market. Our clients have access to data. Okay. So when we're doing a comparable market analysis, it does include data, but it's more than that. It's much more than that. It is a tool that will help us to guide our seller or guide a buyer to the range of value that they will be effective in either buying or selling a property and not getting harmed, that they will have a fair, accurate representation of the value. And we do that by comparison shopping. And so when we put a comparable market analysis together, it's data, but it's not all the data. It's the data that you specifically choose that you think is relevant to the discussion that you have with a seller. And what are we trying to do with the seller? We're trying to influence their thought. That's the definition of selling. We're trying to influence thought. And so when we prepare a CMA, we're picking and choosing data to put into that evaluation that includes data, but it is a sales presentation where we're trying to influence their thought to where they can price a property in a range that will cause the property to sell. It's not to make them feel good to say, you paid 500,000 for it 3 years ago and now it's worth 750,000. Look at how much money you made. It's not to make them feel good. It's not to make them feel bad. It's to show them where the market conditions are right now and where there's a window where they'll be successful in getting the property sold. So the last thing that I'm going to talk about as far as sales skills, I think at this point, before we get into the actual documents themselves, is going back to the value of words in communication. And so when we've talked about sales scripts and we've talked, and I think it even is reflective of what we're doing with a CMA, is that we get too caught up in wanting to be right with the words in a sales presentation. We know that 7% of words are what matter in communication. 38% is how we sound when we are presenting our script. The guy that says, you don't want to sell your property, do you? I mean, the words, aren't really all that great, but the tone of voice is even worse, and the facial expressions are horrible. 7% are the words that we say, 38% are the way that we sound when we're saying it, and 55% of it is the way that we look when we say it, right? And so I want you to take that same idea to your CMA when you're presenting the CMA to your client, is that the data is probably only about 7% of the effectiveness. Now, I know I'm probably losing Bill Young there because of his engineering, and he's good with numbers, okay? But from a sales process, only 7% of the data probably is the effectiveness of it. They have expectations coming into the presentation. They're listening to how confident you are. They're checking their trust and their credibility to you based on the way that you're presenting themselves to you. So I'm going to suggest to you that the best way to use your CMA is to understand how it works and to feel confident about the way that you're putting the market evaluation together so that when you present it to people, they believe you mean what you're saying. Does that make sense? Okay, so here we are. We're going to talk the rest of the class about the actual documents and how to put them together and prepare them to present them to a customer. And I'm telling you that the majority of your success is going to be based on how confident you are in what you're presenting to them and how you can explain it to them and influence their thought that what you're sharing with them is accurate. Everybody shake your head if we're all good with that. Okay. So I'm going to prepare, or I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to show a couple of different CMAs to you right now. Let's see. The first one is one that came out of the Big Bear MLS. So the Big Bear MLS has a comparable market analysis function, and you can do it in electronic format right in the MLS, pick your comps and make adjustments. So I'm just going to go briefly through it. You can customize and add pages to that. So you can see, obviously, I've done a cover sheet for that. This has been around a little bit of a while. Here's page 2. The good news is so there's all of these pages that are in your comparable market analysis. And so there's a cover page where there's some boilerplate information that the MLS has put in there. It will actually pull the homes out of the MLS, the pictures that are in there. This happens to be my old home, the one that we sold a couple of, well, we sold it in May of 2022 for 1,550,000. It just closed escrow for 1,475,000 after they had put in probably $75,000 in improvements. So that sort of gives me a little bit of an idea of what's going on in the market there. But for the purpose of what we're talking about, this CMA, you have a cover sheet. There's my high school picture for all of you that want to know what I looked like 25 years ago. And so we're going to start getting into the comparative market analysis part of the CMA. Is there anybody that uses this particular form for their CMA? Okay, so Gina's using it. I can't see any other hands up, so I don't know if there's anybody else that's using it. What I like about this particular presentation is it allows you to make adjustments to the value. That's what I really like about it. Okay. So, just like an appraisal, there's the subject property, the MLS number, what its status is, what area, what sub area. It goes down into square footage, tax records, year built, and all of that kind of stuff. It pulls all of this data directly out of the MLS. So garbage in, garbage out. Okay. If there's incorrect, data that's put into the MLS, you're going to get incorrect data that comes out of it. Okay. Let's see here. The first comparable picture's a little bit of a problem, came right out of it. They took it when the sun was shining on it. So this one is pretty close. It's over on Starlight Circle. It's an active competing property that is competing with this property. It was on the market when it sold. It's got the neighborhood. Everything's the same there, residential, single family. So what we have here is we have a difference in the square footage. There's a difference in the square footage. And what I did is you can see there's an adjustment over here. I made an adjustment and added $81,600 to the value based on the difference there. Now you might ask, well, how did you come up with that adjustment? I gave them $200 a square foot for the difference. So I did the math. I subtracted this square footage, for this property from the subject, figured out what the difference was. I multiplied it by $200, and that's how I came up with the adjustment. For the year built, you'll notice they're both in the same year, but I have a $75,000 adjustment. And I know that we're not having an interactive conversation, but I would expect one of you would say, well, why did you do that? If they're the same age, why would you do that? It's because I know this property on Starlight Circle has not been remodeled, and that this property that was built in 2002, my home had a substantial remodel that was done in 2021. $121,000 was spent on the remodel in 2021. And then after we sold it, they put another 75,000 in when they added an additional bathroom and laundry area. So I know the difference between these two houses, and in order to figure out the difference between, this price and this price, I have to be able to explain it. And I'm explaining it because I know that there's upgrades to this house. These years on year built are not the same, because functionally the subject property is much better than this one. Shake your head if that makes sense to everybody. Okay, so this is a great time for me to say is that when you're doing a comparable market analysis, if you're thinking that you don't have to think about the information that you're presenting to your seller, you're making a mistake, because you're going to have to do a lot of thinking. You're going to have to know the inventory. You're going to have to know what's different about them. You're going to have to know why one's more appealing than another. And you're also going to have to be able to talk with your client and express those differences, because if you don't do it and they look at this sheet here, they're going to say, well, Mark, why did you give it $75,000? Or if you don't make any adjustments, they're going to say, well, you're telling me my house is worth $1.4 million, or I think it's worth $1.4 million, but this comp says it's worth $1.150 million. My house is not worth $1.150 million. It's worth $1.475 million, and you're giving me a comp at 115. So you need to explain to me how you get from 115 to 1,475,000. Everybody shake your head if that makes sense. Everybody's good there. Okay. So I'm going to stop for a second. Are there any questions so far?
Mark, one question.
Yes, sir.
$200 per square foot,
Mhm.
$15,000 for a bathroom. Where do those numbers come from?
They are my professional opinion based on my experience. You can, so here's where that educated guess came from. Here's where that educated guess came from, Bill, is that when I did the remodels on the bathroom, so I know what they cost when I did the remodels on mine. I have talked with appraisers and asked them what they give as an adjustment for bathrooms. The $200 a square foot that I gave for the quality of construction, I mean, I know people are charging, $300 and $400 a square foot now for new construction, but that does not carry over well to construction that's 20 years old. Even being remodeled and having, $130,000 added and then $75,000 for a bathroom and all of that added to it, that does not translate over dollar to dollar in fair market value. So I made the best professional guess as to how to make those adjustments.
So that's the art part of qualifying.
That is the art part of it. It's the part that's the hardest to teach. It's the hardest. I mean, I remember when we did our discussion the last time and we were talking about doing the comparable market analysis. And I made the comment, I said, I usually have a pretty good feel for the range where a home should be priced. And I remember, the discussion that we had where you said, well, I prefer the data. I prefer to be data driven to get to that number. And my pushback on that is that, the raw data that is available to us through the MLS, as limited as it is, and with the diversity of the homes, is not sufficient to present to a seller accurately what it's going to take to sell their home. We can provide them the data and let them guess, and they're always going to guess high. Or we can tip our thumbs on the scale a little bit, or tip the scales a little bit by trying to paint a compelling sales presentation that will help guide and influence their thought to what the real value is. Make sense? And again, I go back to it, is that it's the hardest thing to teach as to how to make these adjustments. The more experience that you have, the more questions you ask of other people, the more pushback that you get from people, the more successes that you see, you're going to know, you're going to have a better idea of where to put that value. Okay. There is a principle, and I want you guys to all write this down, and the word is justification. I want you to write down the word justification. Whenever you are presenting a comparable market analysis to a client and you make a statement about something, you need to be able to justify why you've said it. If a seller's looking at a comparable market analysis, and let's say that I didn't put these adjustments in here, and he wants $1.4 million or $1.5 million for his house, and he sees this comp, and I present it to him, and he says, "My house is worth more than that. Why would you include a comp at $1.15 million, Mark?" Well, I have to justify the reason why I did it. I have to be able to explain in a compelling manner to that seller why I used it. And the reasons are, Mr. Seller, there are limited comparables that are available in Big Bear. I couldn't give you 6 comps at $1.5 million because they don't exist. Okay. So I've just justified why I didn't give you 6 comps at $1.5 million. I mean, I know that's where the value is, or that's the tighter range, but they're not available. So I express that to you. And I say, and I recognize that this home for $1.15 million is not truly representative of your home, but it's the best that we have to work with. So let's make the adjustments based on the factors that buyers value to see if we can make some sense and make some adjustments that will help us figure out how it compares to your home and why it's so low. And then we start talking about the difference in square feet. We talk about the difference in bathrooms. There's no other adjustments on that. Does that make sense for everybody? Okay. Um, I don't think I need to explain to you guys how I came up with, some of these other ones. You'll see here, there's a 3-car garage, attached garage, and I have a minus $20,000 adjustment. I used to remember, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, a garage was $10,000 and a single car garage was five. It's pretty hard to build a car garage now for, less than $40,000, $50,000. Okay. And so this is an adjustment that is, again, it's sort of a wild ass guess as to what is a real adjustment for a 3-car attached garage versus a 2-car. If you would have put $15,000 there, I wouldn't have argued with you. If you put $25,000 there with you, I wouldn't argue. We're painting a picture. This is not a spreadsheet. We're painting a sales presentation to give to our sellers. Okay. You're going to see the same things in here. Okay. So I want to talk with you a little bit about some scripts. Okay. It's all in the presentation. It's how you sound. Okay. The best sales presentation is not telling. The best sales presentation is asking a series of questions that leads the customer to the right answer or to an answer that makes sense. Okay. So when you are presenting comparables to your seller, the best question to start with is, do you know this area? Now, remember, you are the professional. I'm assuming that you've seen all of these comparables or that you know them a lot better than the seller does. So in order to build your credibility, and this is a Mike Ferry script, it's, do you know this neighborhood? This is 3 blocks away. All of these comps are pretty close. It's 4 blocks away, it's 3 blocks away. Do you know this neighborhood? You ask the customer, do you know this neighborhood? They go, yeah, I know that one. Okay. Do you know this house? Oh yeah, I've driven by that and seen it. Okay. Have you been inside it? The answer is no, 99% of the time. So now you've opened yourself up to some credit or some credibility. Okay. Now you know something that they don't know. Well, Mr. Seller, I've been in this home. I've been in this home. Okay. So now you have just established that they need to be listening to you, right? Okay. So let me tell you about this home here on Starlight Circle. This one's on the upslope. You've got level entry there, so that's a little bit easier of an access there. Longer driveway, it's smaller. So we're going to make some adjustments for square footage there. It is built a year after yours. It's a little bit newer, but it hasn't been remodeled. In fact, it's a little bit worn. I've been in that home and it was a little bit worn. It's got one less bath from you, so there's an adjustment that needs to be made there. Its lot size is larger. I didn't give you, I didn't take anything away from you for that. Its price is $1,199,000. Now remember, this is competition, and with the adjustments, I come up to $1,410,000. Okay, I think your home is a little bit better than this one. Okay. I didn't say your house is worth $1,475,000. I said it's better. Your house is better than this one. That's sure to make them feel good. So we're talking about the presentation. I'm asking questions to gather from them what they know and what they don't know and getting them to admit that I know more than they do. And the minute they admit that I know more than they do, then all of a sudden I can share with them how I came across the property and tell them why their house is better than this particular comparable. Fair enough? I'm hoping that there's some head shaking. So let's find one that I can give some negative adjustments to. Ba, 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 ba. Okay. So I don't think that there's anything that is priced higher than this. Okay, this one was here on Pegasus. Okay, so we use this one for example. Okay, so I've used the example of a home that's not as good as the subject. This house is on Pegasus. Do you know where that property is located? Yeah, it's here in Castle Glen. Do you know the house? I think we might have walked by it. Have you been in it? The answer is no. I have been in this home. Pegasus is up on the cul-de-sac street that's at the very top of Castle Glen, where there are absolutely fantastic mountain views that are far superior to what we have here. Did you know that? Probably aren't going to like to hear that. Okay. So let me go through it. You know, the square footage is a little bit smaller than yours. I made an adjustment and gave you some additional value for that. I gave you some additional value for, for the remodel. I gave you an additional thing for the $15,000. What I didn't do was I didn't take away, they don't say lake or anything here, so they're not gonna be able to see it clearly here, but I was hoping that they were gonna say in here that there was a ski slope view, which that house up on Pegasus should have. There should be a pretty panoramic view there. It's not going to be the peekaboo view of the lake that we have in the subject. This is going to be a 180-degree view that's going to be far superior to the subject. And I would tell you that this house is, for most buyers, is going to be more appealing. So let me ask you, Mr. Seller, would you prefer to have a panoramic lake and ski slope view or for the same price, or would you prefer to have a peekaboo view? And their answer is going to be what? Somebody shouted out. Somebody shouted out.
Panoramic.
Panoramic. Absolutely. You know, I agree. Don't you think most buyers would feel the same way? And they're going to say yes. Of course they would. Okay. So that's why with the adjusted price that you see there's such a big difference here in the value. If I was really spending a lot more time, I probably would have made more conservative adjustments because it's hard to justify a view at $250,000, right? Remember, I said you have to justify it. Now I've painted myself by preparing the CMA and having this big gap here. I've created a problem with myself to be able to justify this home and being the view being the only difference to it. I'm going to have a hard time making that adjustment. I think if I remember correctly, this one's full log too, so I can make some adjustments for the full log. Make sense for everybody? Okay. In the analysis part, give me some questions about the analysis because we're almost out of the analysis part.
Sort of a real basic question, Mark. How many comps do you suggest including on a CMA? Because I see in this particular example, you have, I think, 5 or 6. What's the minimum number?
I think the minimum number should probably be 3 and 3. It should be 3 and 3. I have seen agents walk into a listing presentation with 27 comps. I think that's very, very difficult. It's confusing. It means the presentation is going to last 4 hours. So I don't think that's good. I think putting 3 and 3 and going in with 6 is a little bit light, particularly because you're going to get one of the objections you're going to get from the seller every time is you're going to say, well, my neighbor hold over here, it's sold, for 1,300,000. And, it was 3 years ago. That's not helpful for them. Or maybe it was 6 months ago, but it was, 50% smaller. Okay. So, in order to overcome those kinds of objections, in order to overcome them, is just say, is that, there's a lot of data available on Zillow and there's a lot of data available on all these other places. I pulled the ones that are most relevant to yours so that I could express to you and present to you what it's going to take to sell your home. I did not include every single comparable. But in my professional opinion, I'm giving you the ones that help paint the picture of what it's going to take to sell.
Got it. One follow-up question to that. So is it more important to find a property in the neighborhood as a comp and then adjusting for bedrooms, baths, square footage, et cetera? Or is it more important to have something that might be in a wider area, but be more aligned with the number of bedrooms, baths, square footage, et cetera?
Okay. Good question. And I think every CMA is a little bit different. And that probably doesn't help you. Let me give you the criteria of what I'm looking for. Is I want to show people the outliers. I want to show them something better than theirs so I can point downward. I want to show them something that is not as good as theirs so I can point upward. And I want to have a mix of those. And you can do that. You can do that with, for example, Castle Glen. I can use a comparable in Castle Glen that is very similar to something in Pinewood Estates. And the houses look the same, they're the same age, they're the same size, and yet there is a $240,000 difference in them. And so when I put those two things side by side, I'm going to say, okay, the houses are similar, but the values are different. Why is that? Because your location is superior to that one, so therefore your home is better. So we are truly taking the comparables that are in all of here, and we're choosing them on purpose so that we can make a presentation and an explanation and a justification that says, you're here, you're better than this, you're better than this, here's why, here's why, here's why. You're not as good as this, you're not as good as this, and here's why, here's why, here's why. That's what we get paid for, is we get paid for knowing those things and being able to explain it to our customers. Now, I know everybody's saying I'm not that good yet. I'm not that good yet. I make shit up all the time. You can take that right out of the recording because nobody is good enough to tell somebody exactly what their home is going to sell for unless you're the one that's writing the check. Right? Typically, a lot of times I will, present something to a seller like this, and they'll say, well, based on all of this, Mark, what do you think? And I like to turn it around to say to them, it doesn't matter what I think. I mean, now that you've seen these prices, what's better than yours and what's worse than yours, what price do you think that we're going to have to put it in the range of that's going to be of interest to the buyers and sellers out there? Where do you think it needs to be? And they may say, I'm confused. There's prices all over. They may say that I'm confused. Okay. And if they're confused, I would rather then sort of tell them what I think. More than likely, they're not going to be confused. They're going to ask you what you think because they don't want to tell you how disappointed they are. And they're going to see you painting this picture that says you're 1,475,000, 1,000,005, and they were dreaming of 1,006,000 or 1,007,000. On this house, that we're talking about on Morningstar, they listed originally at 1,650,000 before they sold where they ended up selling for. And so when they ask you what you think, what they're asking you for is sort of a little bit disingenuous. I mean, because what they really want you is to tell them what they want to hear, right? Okay. So you really want to turn it back, back to them.
I have a question.
Okay.
So Gina asked the other one that I was going to ask, but in regards to like date range, if you have something that there's really no comparables for because nothing in the area is sold similar to it for like 2 years, or things have been sitting in that area. And I'm talking about a specific location, the Lakeside Village. There really aren't any comparables. So, and when you're asked, for comparables, how do you answer that question when you don't have any?
When you say Lakeside Village, where is that exactly?
The Haunton,
Mobile home park?
yeah.
Okay. So, if there are if there are no, in that particular park, because it's so specific to that park, I would go back to get the comps that are there. I would go back and get the comps that are there, if it's 2 years back or if it's 3 years back. And I would say, 3 years ago, this one sold for 87,000. And you can see that these at 65 and $75,000 haven't sold since then. So this one that sold for 85,000 or $87,000 isn't really a valid comp. The market has come down from that. So in order to be competitive, you need to be lower than the other active listings that aren't selling. And that's where we start.
Um, that answers that question. And then in regards to just like a regular, home in a, say Sugarloaf or Bear City or Fox Farm, what do you suggest on the date range to run comparables typically?
I prefer 3 months if you can find them. I'll go back 6 months. I'll even go back a year, if they're very limited. I've recently done a CMA, or I have a seller that we have an offer on now that's been on the market for a while, and it's brand new construction that was complete last year. And there were no new constructions in Sugarloaf that we could use as comparables. And so, I mean, it was very, very difficult to do a CMA. So I would go back. I mean, we went back long enough to where there was new construction that sold, and we made some adjustments because the market had declined some. And so we made some adjustments from there. But there was nothing clearly that could justify the price that we had chosen, because there were no other comps that were exactly the same. Okay. So I'm going to get out of this because I don't think there's more that we can do. We've talked about how to present the information. We've talked about making adjustments. It is very much a judgment call how you're going to make those adjustments. And the more of these that you do, the better off you're going to get. These are the two sales. They never did update. I don't know if they didn't pull a permit. There's actually, in this latest sale that was at 1,477,000, they actually added a couple hundred square feet in that bathroom that wasn't there before. So we will go down. So in the comparable market analysis that's in the MLS, it has this the minimums and maximums. There's pages in here that you can keep or you can get rid of. It has days on market charts and visuals that you can use, price graphs, of the list prices versus sold. All these list prices haven't sold. This sort of gives you an idea that none of them sold for full price. This shows you where all of the comps are located, and this is sort of a grid view, or just a list view of them. Quite a bit less information that's there. Here's just the sold ones, I believe. Here's the summary. This is a good sheet, for people to go through that like data. Although I like talking about finish and I like talking about materials, so that you can explain the differences. But you have these nice visuals. It's not as good as the next CMA that we're going to go to. Here's where the pricing recommendation is. It says sell price statistics, the average, the high, the median, the low. It's got that. Sell price, and it gives price per square foot statistics. I thought that was pretty good. That sort of is helpful, a different way to look at things. But all of you, and including myself, are going to have to be comfortable with not having a CMA that says the number is 752,000 and everybody agrees and everybody understand it and it's obvious to everybody. That's not going to happen. You're going to get these reports that are going to have a lot of gray area that you're going to have to be able to present to people in a way that isn't offensive to them, but that you can logically and emotionally justify the values that, the value range that you're recommending. There's some other important things that you can talk to about when you get people with objections on pricing. They may say, I agree with you that, the value is 1,000,004. But I want to try 1,550,000. And so you can talk about the importance of pricing. Is if you're at fair market value, 60% of the people are your potential buyers that are in the market. And remember, there was only 6 last year, so that means only 3 or 3.2 buyers in the next entire year are going to be potential buyers for your home if you're at fair market value. If you follow your strategy and overprice it by 10%, you're only going to have 1 out of those 6. And if you price it 15% over, you're not even going to have 1. You might have 1, and you might not have a buyer in the next year. You guys follow that description, what I gave you guys there? Is even if you're at fair market value, not every buyer is going to buy your house. They might buy something because they have a different preference. Okay, and the more you overprice it, the less opportunity that you have. It's really good when you're presenting to a seller and they say, I want my property to sell and I will list it at fair market value. It is good to be able to say to them, there were only 5 buyers all of last year for a buyer like your home. Okay. You don't have 50 buyers to choose from. You don't have 5 buyers this month. You're going to have 5 all year. That's why pricing is so critical. And if you're highly motivated to sell, you can lower the price and open yourself up to more buyers. I think everybody has that. That's why this presentation process is so important. The activity for timing, this illustrates how important the activity is in the first part of the market. When you put properties on the market, all of the activity happens in the very front end. This is talking about weeks here, not months. Okay. So you might ask why is there so much activity here in the beginning? Well, there have been buyers that have been looking for properties like this for the last 6 months, the last 9 months, and they don't like anything that they see on the market. But every time there's a new listing that comes on the market, they get an alert or their agent calls them or they see it on Zillow. And so in the first 2 weeks that a property is on the market is the best time, or the first 3 weeks that you're on the market is the best time to sell, because all of the buyers that have been waiting for the right house that haven't bought something are waiting in the wings. And so the minute you put it on the market, if you're right, and one of those buyers is out there is the right buyer for your house, you have a good chance of selling in the first 3 weeks. If you're overpriced and those buyers say, no, I'm not interested in it, as week 4, week 5, week 6, week 7 comes by, they're looking at the new listings that come on the market, not yours. So it's important to be priced right from the very beginning, not only because the activity is at the beginning, but also because you open yourself up to more potential buyers. I like this one. The average percentage difference between the selling and asking price by length of time the home was on the market. If it's less than 4 weeks, the average is just under 2% discount. The longer you're on the market, the more you're going to have to discount the price. And on top of that, you might have to reduce the price. Okay. And then when a buyer sees that you've been on the market for 24 weeks, they're going to say you're still overpriced, right? So we don't want to price high from the beginning. Seller's desired price. We always know that that's going to be high. Here's what's really the fair market value. Here's what the buyers want to pay, right? That's a pretty good graph that's there. Everybody good with all of that? So I think that's all of my slides for this one. So I'm going to stop the share really quick. I'm going to let you guys ask any questions that you guys might have. Go ahead, Gina.
So on that particular version that you did, it has to me all the great pages. When I tend to do it, I don't know, there's all this extra ancillary information because I think I'm clicking too many boxes in the CMA in terms of what should be added. Is there a way, especially I think this would be helpful for the newer folks, to know exactly what when you're going in and building it, what boxes you're clicking to make it look exactly like you did? So maybe like after the class, that's something that can be provided just as a side.
I am going to share my screen and I'm going to show you really quickly where that's at. So we are now in the MLS and we are at the CMA that I did. Okay. I should probably go back. I mean, I'm going to let you guys see it. I'm going to let you guys see how I did it. So I go to my CMAs, There's a few of them in here. Training class. This is the one. So it comes up. So I'm going to go into edit. You can go into create. But when I go into edit, there's a start. And the start is you have to pick a client. You have to have a client name that is in there. I put training class. And then you have to create a contact so you can associate your CMA with a client. Then it comes over to pages, and you can see all of these pages. These are the ones that I've selected. I have more pages. I have more pages that are in here. I have our marketing plan, past sales list, the team members and some different things for the CMAs that I was doing. So you can check the pages that you want. If you don't want my cover sheet, you can remove it. Cover sheet with photo, going to keep that. Price adjustments, you're going to keep that. You may say, I don't want the minimums and maximums. I'm going to pull that out, and you can do that. So I think that answers your questions about adding pages and doing different things like that. The subject property, when you come in here, you can download the information in here by putting in an MLS number, and it will draw the data. You can put in a parcel number, and it will draw some of the data. Okay, it'll have what the tax rolls have. You have to add remarks in that case and different things, if that makes sense. So
Hey, Mark, sorry to interrupt you.
go
Can
ahead.
you go back one page to the pages? Yeah, I just want to take a picture of that. Awesome, thank you.
Okay. And so you can see when I'm in here is that I uploaded these. Now, I don't remember how I did it because I did it about 8 years ago. But there is a way to do it. Okay. So that's for another class. You come to the cover sheet, we'll talk about the cover sheet. In here is where you actually pick and choose your comparables. So when you come in, you put in the subject property information, and then you do a search and you choose which listings that you want to add into the CMA. Okay, you get to pick and choose. Then it will map them based on the ones that you've chosen. I think. Yeah, maybe not. There it is. And then here's the page where you make the adjustments. Okay. And so you can see there's a scrolling button here, or a scrolling arrow here. So I've made some adjustments. When there was a difference in beds or there was a difference in baths or whatever, I made adjustments. Okay. I think I made some adjustments over here for the garage. And that is something that you get to choose when you put them in. And again, what I would share with you is, don't ask me to give you what is a bathroom worth and what is a bedroom worth and what is a square footage worth. Remember that you're painting a picture. And so you need to choose a number that is going to accurately reflect where that property should be. A basic bathroom, you might get away with $3,500 for a remodel. A high custom bathroom might be $40,000. I'm not going to say who it was, but I know somebody that spent $50,000 on a bathroom remodel. Okay. And it wasn't a big one. So that number is very subjective based on the quality. And you're going to have to make the decision, is it a $40,000 bathroom or is it a $5,000 bathroom? So you get to come in here and you get to make these adjustments. I did this for age. Okay. Then we come in here, it has a price, the pricing thing where you get to put in your recommendation. I recommend that you don't put in the price in your CMA. I recommend that you don't put your recommendation in there. Somebody asked me why.
Why?
Why? Because it can't help you, it can only hurt you.
Even if it's a range?
A range might be okay. A range might be okay, but it also can't help you, it can only hurt you. Okay.
Got it.
Another thing that I want you all to write down is I want you to stop sending your CMAs to your clients. I want you to present them.
Are you of the philosophy that sending it in advance is a good idea and then you physically meet with them or video with them? Because I've attended quite a few trainings where they recommend that, but I'm not certain if that's the best approach.
Where I'm at today, where I'm at today with it is, I think the answer is don't send it. This is, you have access to data from, and I'm role playing with you. You have access, as a homeowner to, what Zillow says your home is worth. You have access to data from there. You have access from all kinds of different areas. I'm going to be sharing with you, from my professional opinion, the comparables that are um, relevant to your home. And without having my 5 years, my 10 years, my, whatever years worth of experience, you're not going to come to the same conclusion that I would. So I'm not going to send it to you. I want to present the information to you and answer all of your questions at the time we do it. And then I will leave it with you. That's my promise to you, is I will leave it with you. But I'm not going to send it to you because it won't help you and it won't help me.
Got it.
Okay.
While you're on that point, Mark, and you're transitioning to the KV Core Bold Trail CMA, to the point that you just made about Zillow, Realtor.com, Homes.com, etc. Could you elaborate a little bit on your scripting of how to combat what those estimates, zestimates, etc., are versus what we're going to be talking about when we meet with the client in our CMA?
Yeah. I think my verbiage is, do you have any, well, so let's role play it, because I think if you give me things, it'll make it easier for me to
Yep.
answer. So, when we get together, do you have any ideas, Gina, as to what your home is worth?
Yeah, I went on Zillow and I saw that it said my Zestimate was 1.2 million.
Okay. Okay. And do you think that's what your home is worth?
Yeah, I love my home. I think it's beautiful and I've put a lot into it. So yeah, I think it's worth that.
Okay.
Maybe even a little more.
Maybe even a little bit more. Okay. So if I said, well, will you list your home for 1,200,000, what would you say?
Would I what? Sorry, I
What,
didn't
what
hear.
would, what would you say if I said, let's list your home for 1,200,000? What would you say?
Well, I want a net 1.2, so I would probably want to list a little bit more than that. So that's what I get.
Okay. So you're discounting the Zillow value as well.
Yeah, I guess so.
Okay, good. And I'm glad you're smart for doing that. Zillow themselves, in a primary home market, says there's a 7% plus or minus valuation error with their algorithm. That means that it could be 7% higher for your home or 7% lower. But what's even worse, Gina, is that Big Bear is not a typical tract home area. It's a specialty area, and their numbers aren't even, I've seen things that are 20, 30% off. Okay. So when I come out to meet with you, I'm going to bring you the homes that I've seen personally that are the best representation that I can share with you about how we can value your home. How does that sound?
Sounds great.
Okay. Did I answer what you were after there? The
Yep.
key,
Thank
the
you.
keys in there was I asked questions. I clarified the questions by asking, because I wanted to know where your head was at.
Mhm.
And the minute you said that you didn't trust Zillow, I was like, hallelujah, hallelujah, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So let's see, we are running okay, so we're running to the end. So the next one is a presentation that is done through Bold Trail. There's a lot of benefit to this. It looks really nice. Now, you remember I said, when you're doing a presentation, the data or the words is only 7%, of the value of the presentation. 38% is how you sound, how confident, how knowledgeable, how trustworthy you are. That is 38% of the conversation. 55% is how you look. And so I really like the way that this KV Core or this Bold Trail presentation shows, but there's some limitations. I have not found a way to make the adjustments in the report itself that we can do in the CMA that comes out of the other one, okay? So, I'm just going to sort of go through this and let you see visually what's there. And the last thing I would say is I'm not an expert on using Bold Trail and doing the CMAs through it. Obviously, you can see Evan, presented this one. He's really good at it. I'm not going to promise you that he will be the coach, but I can also tell you that in Bold Trail, there are training videos that show you exactly how to do it. And if you get in there and experiment with it using the principles that we've talked about today, you'll be able to use this format and explain it the same way that you would the other one. Okay. So let's see. We have
Mark,
that.
as you're going through that, one more question about Bold Trail specifically. There's a section, and I'm sure you'll get to it, where you can actually add in like other comps, like Aunt Sally's comp, and it'll map it on that grid. And you can also add, for instance, like what Zillow says, what Realtor.com says, et cetera. And then you'll see all of that on the graph. What's your position on including that other information just to kind of address it right away and kind of confront it? Or is that something you wouldn't put in a CMA?
No, I would put it in. Yeah, I would put it in. And the reason why is, and it's confidence, is that I believe that I can express to somebody the honest to God's truth in a way that they can understand. Not that they will buy. I mean, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. I mean, that's what explaining the obvious is to the unreasonable. I mean, there are sellers out there that when they see, everything in black and white, they're not going to believe you no matter what you say. Okay. And they're not going to act on what you say because they don't want to do it. And you can't stop that. My point, or what my position is as we go through the CMA class, is that, if you know where the value should be and you understand how to present that information in a way that you justify and influence the customer's thought to make the right decision, you're helping them. Okay. And that means the value is you. It's your presentation style. It's your understanding of the market. That's where your value is. It's not this CMA program. Everybody's got this CMA program. It's what you do with it that's going to make the difference. Okay. So, it's really interesting. All of these different tabs, it's why am I the right fit? Remax is the number one name. There's a lot of slides in here that are sort of pounding on the chest kind of thing. But you can see the format is that it makes people think that you're tech savvy, when you've got this presentation and you know how to do it, right? All of these different things, 2 million. I mean, this is all bragging about Remax Big Bear, okay, and what we do, okay? Remax.com, that's a good one, talking about how many visits we get versus, I mean, so there's all kinds of good things in there to build credibility. Do you guys think that the seller really cares? Me neither, to be honest with you. Me neither. Okay. We're going to go into what's my home worth. So, in this particular ones, it maps out really, cool. You've got the sold comps, you've got the active comps that are on there. It tells what the criteria was for the search. I like this graph better. Let's do the overview. This one has that. I prefer it when it is, where'd it go? I know I went down. I don't want to do the down part. Big picture scale. I like this one better. This one has, oops. This one has this price range thing that shows sort of where everything is. Here's the Redfin value. Here's the homes.com value. I think this is the example of everybody averaged. Here's the average of all the closed comps. Here's the realtor.com value. Here's where the 25 to 50% larger comps off. There are 4 that are up in this range. So, basically this paints a picture that says, in order to get up to this range, if that's the number that you're wanting to look for, there's 4 sales up there, but they're 25 to 50% larger than yours to get here. Okay, this is what Evan's recommending. Um, here's some of the other, what does that one say? This is the most recent sale is right here, so that shows where it's at. So you have a graph. And so when you show somebody this and you say, so tell me, based on what you've seen so far, where do you think your home should be listed? Well, I think I should be listed at 475. Where'd you come up with that? Right? You've got something visual that you can ask them to do that with. So I just hit on the comparables where it shows this is one. Look at that one. Pretty nice looking house. I have not seen the subject, so I can't really compare the subject to it because I haven't seen it. Evan has done that. But all of these different comps that are in here, these are the active ones showing where they're at and what they look like. Here's the sold ones. Oh, I remember that house. Sold that once, a long time ago. Oops, so I skipped. Is there any questions? Do you guys want me to stick in those comparables at all? Any questions on that? I
No
know,
questions. I just want to just point something out. If the comps are listed on CRMLS and MLS, the MRC MLS, and you have both connected and Bold Trail, you have to delete the duplicates.
that's correct. Yeah, that's correct. Okay. Okay, so we are going to get out of this. Market analysis, average. So this starts going into, some of the trends and everything. Um, well, this is sort of good. I wish we could customize this to say because I don't think the walk score matters in Big Bear, and I don't think the schools matter for most of the second home. There's some things in here that don't influence the value. I wish we could customize that slide for what does. Okay. Um, Supply and demand, number of buyers that are looking for the house, comparable supply. Look at that. You check that button and it shows. So
Do you know where that comes from, that data?
this is coming directly from MLS.
What I mean is like oh, sorry, wrong slide. Never mind. Disregard.
Are you talking about the walkability and all that?
No, there's a bold trail slide that has something like, and it might be the upside down triangle, and it's showing the funnel of like how many potential buyers there are.
Yeah, he did not use
It
that.
didn't include that. Okay, yeah. Because I always was curious where that data was pulled from. Like, how does it know how many?
Oh, is that
There, that one.
I'm not sure. I am not sure where they're getting that data. It could be out of Bold Trail's leads that
Hmm.
have been put in there where everybody said, their price ranges from 250 to 300. I mean, it could be coming from that. Um, I mean, that's probably where they're pulling it. But to be honest, I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Um, so, there's a thing here. I mean, obviously, this is something that gets sent out to people. Again, I don't want you guys to be sending CMAs out to people and then having them look at the data. I mean, they're not going to list with you if they determine their value from Zillow. Why would you let them, what would makes you think that they're going to list with you because you send them a CMA and you don't express your value and your knowledge to them? I mean, I think it's really important to do that. The other thing that I wanted to share with all of you, and it's in my notes here, to share with you is that there is a huge trend that is taking place now in the business I think is really important for all of you to be aware of, is that the competition for business has really, really increased. I mean, it has really, really increased. I mean, we're not only competing with 300 agents in Big Bear, we're competing with, probably 1,000 agents in Southern California or 10,000 agents in Southern California that say, I can list your house in Big Bear and sell it. So the competition is pretty stiff. And so, why would I share that with you is that, this is a plug to when you're prospecting, prospect for relationships, don't prospect for a lead. Because if you get a lead and you go and you do a CMA presentation and they don't know you and they don't love you and they don't trust you, they have a brother-in-law in real estate, they have 5 other people that are willing to discount their commission to get their listing, it's really hard to compete in that environment when you don't have the that relationship and that trust and that that loyalty from your customer. When you don't have that, you have to fudge your standards on price. You have to promise outlandish marketing that isn't going to make any difference, right? I mean, they're going to say, no, I'm not going to list at the right price, which will make the sale easy. I'm going to ask you to spend $10,000 on marketing and throw an open house and do these, do a Zillow tour and do this and I mean, they're going to ask you to jump through hoops to win the listing when what it's really going to take is to price the property correctly and let you do your thing. Am I right? Okay. So, this is a plug is the way to build your business is don't come up with, I've got the killer presentation and I'm going to go out there and wow these people I've never met before, because believe it, you're not going to wow those people. They're going to be looking at you with the same level of distrust as they do everybody else. And they're going to be looking for somebody that tells them what they want to hear. And what they want to hear isn't going to be the most profitable thing for you. So, are you going to get listing leads and presentations that you're going to do with people you don't know? Yes. Do I want you to do the best presentation you probably can? Absolutely. Get really good at it. But you're not going to win in this business without relationships where somebody comes to you and says, Gina, I know you know your stuff. What do I need to sell my home? And then you go out there and you tell them the truth and you have that relationship with them. You've given them a competent and compelling presentation, and you've told them exactly what they need to sell. They know you, they love you, they trust you, they're going to use you, and you're not competing with anybody else. That's how you are going to build your business, is by building those relationships. You will get 99 out of 100 listings where you're dealing with somebody that knows you and loves you and trusts you, and you're probably going to get 25-30% of the ones with the people that don't. And not only are you only going to get 20 or 30% of those presentations, but they're going to be less quality listings for you because they're much harder to convert. Okay. So I think, let me review the notes and see if there's anything that I forgot to share. I don't think that there's anything. Oh, pick your format. If it's the MLS format, go in there and learn how to use it. If it's the Bold Trail format, go in there and take the classes, learn how to use it, do some practice CMAs, do some scenarios where you go in there and you mess around and you figure it out, and then role play presenting your presentation to somebody in real life. Don't practice on real life customers. Don't practice on real life customers. That's expensive. Practice with your peers. Not only will you get better, but they'll get better as a result also. So pick your format, master it, and study it. Go deep. Go deep in the explanation so that you provide real value. One of the things that I'm hearing a lot about right now is, we need to demonstrate, or no, we need to tell people our value. I don't think that's true. I think when we provide value, people know it. I think by the tone of voice, by the information that we gather, by the explanation, by the way we treat them, by the questions we ask them, by the patience we show them, they're going to know whether we're professional, not by our behavior, not because we have to express our value to them. That makes sense. I think everything else I have shared, so I don't have anything to add unless you guys have any other questions.
I just want to say how much I appreciated this training. So thanks, Mark.
Thank you, guys. Okay. So, like anything, take the information. It will be recorded. If you guys need to listen to it again, you'll be able to do that. If you have any questions that are specific on transactions that you're doing or properties, I'd be happy to answer those questions for you. So just reach out to me and we'll go from there.
Is there a place where I can find these recordings? I would assume there's past recordings. I don't know where they're at.
I can send you the YouTube channel link.
Oh, okay, great.
Very cool. Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Awesome.
All right, guys.
Thank you.